I stood in the conference room, my palms resting on the polished mahogany table, staring at the faces of the people who had just shattered 20 years of my life with a single sheet of paper. My boss, Robert Langston, smirked with an air of triumph, as if he had just won some invisible battle. Selena Kingston, we appreciate your years of service, but unfortunately, we're making some strategic changes. Effective immediately, you're no longer employed at Whitmore and Langston. I didn't blink. I didn't tremble. I didn't even react the way they expected me to, because unlike them, I wasn't surprised. I knew this was coming. And what they didn't know, I was ready. My name is Selena Kingston, and I'm 45 years old. For 20 years, I poured my blood, sweat, and soul into Whitmore and Langston, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the country. I built marketing campaigns that made them millions. I trained interns who went on to become directors. I handled crises that could have sunk the company. And in return, they discarded me like an expired contract. But let's back up a little. 6 months before that day, something strange started happening. My boss, Robert Langston, the man I had been working with since the beginning, suddenly became distant. He started holding meetings without me. Emails that once CC'd me were now private threads between him and the younger executives. Clients I had personally brought in were being reassigned. I wasn't stupid, I could read the signs, they were phasing me out. And then I heard a whisper. It came from Olivia Hart, one of the secretaries who had been at the firm almost as long as I had. One evening, as I was gathering my things to leave, she slipped into my office and shut the door behind her. "Selena," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "They're planning something. Robert and the partners have been discussing replacements." I arched an eyebrow. "Replacements?" She hesitated. "For you." My heart should have stopped. My stomach should have dropped. But instead, something inside me lit up. I had given them 20 years of loyalty, dedication, and expertise, and this was how they repaid me? I smiled, not because I was happy, but because they had just declared war, and they had no idea I had already set my traps. Over the next few months, I became two people. On the surface, I was the perfect employee, dedicated, professional, still showing up to work as if I wasn't being slowly erased. But behind the scenes, I was quietly pulling every string I had ever tied in this company. First, I backed up everything: client data, key financial documents, even those little confidential reports that the executives thought were locked away. I wasn't stealing company information. Oh no, I was simply collecting receipts. Next, I started sabotaging their little plans. A crucial proposal Robert was preparing for a multi-million-dollar client. Somehow the file got corrupted right before the presentation. An important investor meeting? Whoops, someone accidentally miscommunicated the location, sending them to the wrong building. And the best part? I made sure no one could trace it back to me. But I wasn't done yet. I had spent 2 decades building relationships in this industry. My contacts were my power, and I was about to use them in a way that would make Whitmore and Langston beg for mercy. Then, the final confirmation came. One evening, long after most employees had left, I saw the lights still on in Robert's office. Curiosity got the best of me, and I walked down the hall. The door wasn't fully closed, and inside I heard it. "We'll announce her termination next week. She won't see it coming." My fingers clenched into fists. They thought I was clueless. They thought they were playing me. "Oh, Robert, you have no idea what's coming." The morning of my firing, I walked into that conference room with my resignation letter already printed and signed. I let them go through their little scripted speech, let them smirk, let them believe they had won. Then I slid the letter across the table. Robert frowned, flipping it open. "I knew," I said, my voice smooth, calm. "I've known for months." His eyes darted up, confusion, maybe a little fear. "I could have left quietly," I continued, leaning back. "But then you wouldn't have learned anything, would you?" The room fell into a thick, suffocating silence. Because they hadn't just fired me, they had just set themselves up for the most brutal downfall of their lives. And I was about to pull the trigger. Robert Langston was still holding my resignation letter, but his fingers had turned stiff, almost as if he was gripping something toxic. His jaw clenched. I could see it. The way his mind was scrambling, calculating, trying to figure out how I had known. I didn't give him the satisfaction of an answer. Instead, I stood up, adjusted my blazer, and smirked. "Good luck, Robert," I said smoothly. "You're going to need it." Then I walked out of that conference room, not as a defeated woman, but as a woman with an empire in her hands and a plan set to burn their world down. And they had no idea. The moment I stepped out of that office, I disappeared. Not physically, but professionally. I knew exactly how companies like Whitmore and Langston worked. Their biggest strength wasn't their leadership, it was their reputation. They thrived on prestige, on power, on the illusion that they were untouchable. So I became the ghost that haunted them. First, I made one phone call to a close contact at the largest consulting firm in the city, Harrison & Co. The CEO, Alexander Harrison, had tried to poach me before, but I had turned him down out of loyalty to Whitmore and Langston. That loyalty was dead. "Selena," he greeted me, his voice warm, curious. "To what do I owe this call?" "I'm ready," I said. There was a pause, then a quiet chuckle. Well, took them long enough to push you away. Let's talk." While Robert and his cronies were celebrating my exit, I was already plotting their biggest downfall. The first move? Their clients. Whitmore and Langston's biggest accounts existed because of me. I was the one who nurtured the relationships, who made sure deals stayed secure. Without me, those connections were fragile. So I spent the next 2 weeks making a few very strategic calls. "Hi, Mr. Reynolds, it's Selena Kingston. Yes, I know, crazy news, right? Listen, I wanted to check in on your upcoming project with Whitmore and Langston." "Oh, no, I won't be handling it anymore. They've decided to go in a different direction." Pause, silence, then a shift, concern, hesitation, and then the golden words, "Selena, I trust you. If you're leaving, I'm not sure we want to stay either." Bingo. One by one, Whitmore and Langston's biggest clients started pulling out. Then came the whispers. I never had to spread any rumours. I let the truth do all the work. See, Robert thought he was slick. He thought he could quietly replace me with someone younger, cheaper, and inexperienced, and no one would notice. But they did, because suddenly things at Whitmore and Langston weren't running as smoothly. Deadlines were being missed, proposals were getting rejected. The once pristine reputation of the company was starting to crack. And then the lawsuit hit. Oh, I didn't file it. Olivia Hart did. See, Olivia had been sitting on some very damning evidence for years. Proof of underhanded dealings, wage theft, and quiet settlements Whitmore and Langston had paid to keep employees silent. She had been too scared to act alone. But I gave her the push she needed. And when the lawsuit hit the media, it was game over. I sat back in my chair, sipping my coffee, watching the chaos unfold. Robert had no idea where the fire was coming from. He called up old clients, trying to mend the damage. They wouldn't return his calls. He sent legal threats. I wasn't intimidated. He tried to smear my name, painting me as a disgruntled ex-employee. But guess what? No one bought it. Because I had 20 years of a flawless reputation. Robert? He had lies, deception, and now scandal. And then the final blow. Harrison and Comey made an announcement. They were launching a new department, one that offered better services, lower fees, and the kind of client relationships Whitmore and Langston had failed to maintain. And guess who was heading the department? Me. 2 months after they fired me, Whitmore and Langston was in shambles. Clients gone, reputation destroyed, legal battles piling up. And Robert Langston was forced to step down as CEO. I watched it all unfold with the sweetest satisfaction. And on the day the official announcement was made, I sent Robert a message, just 3 words. Told you so. Robert Langston's empire was crumbling, and he knew it. Every major client had jumped ship. His company was plastered across the news for its internal scandals. And the lawsuit Olivia filed? It had attracted the attention of federal investigators. He was drowning, and there was no lifeline in sight. And yet, somehow, Robert still didn't realise who had orchestrated it all. But he was about to find out. I was in my new office at Harrison & Company, reviewing our latest client acquisitions, when my assistant buzzed in. "Selena, you have a visitor. He's not on the schedule." I arched an eyebrow. "Who is it?" A pause, then, "Robert Langston." The satisfaction that surged through me was like pure adrenaline. Send him in. The door opened and in walked the man who had underestimated me. Robert looked nothing like the arrogant CEO who had smirked as he fired me 2 months ago. His face was drawn, his expensive suit slightly wrinkled, and there was something in his eyes I had never seen before. Desperation. Selena, he started, forcing a smile. You're looking, well. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs, letting the moment stretch, letting him feel the shift in power. I know, I said simply. His jaw tightened. Listen, we need to talk. Things have taken a turn at Whitmore and Langston. Oh, I knew that his board had turned against him, that they had blamed him for the company's decline, that his co-founder, Richard Whitmore, was planning to dissolve their partnership altogether. Robert Langston was no longer a CEO. He was a man hanging by a thread, and I was the one who had tightened the noose. I need your help, Selena, he finally admitted, his voice strained. I tilted my head. Help? Yes. Look, I know we didn't part on good terms, but you know this business inside and out. I need you back. We can rebuild together. I'll even make you partner. I let out a soft chuckle. Partner? He had fired me like I was nothing. And now he wanted me to save him. I stood up slowly, walking around my desk, stopping just inches from him. Then I leaned in and whispered the words that shattered any hope he had left. I'd rather watch you burn. Robert's face paled. Selena, be reasonable. We built Whitmore and Langston together. You don't have to destroy it. I narrowed my eyes. I didn't destroy it, Robert. You did. I just made sure the whole world saw the truth. His breath hitched. He knew I was right. I walked back to my desk, settling into my chair like a queen reclaiming her throne. As for your offer, I smiled coldly. I wouldn't work with you if you paid me everything you had left. His mouth opened, closed. He swallowed hard. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. But before he reached the door, I called out, "Oh, and Robert?" He paused, stiffening. I leaned forward, my voice smooth, mocking. Told you so. The final nail in his coffin came 2 weeks later. Whitmore and Langston officially shut down. Robert Langston's name was now poison in the industry. No one would touch him. No one would hire him. And me? I was just getting started. The day Whitmore and Langston officially collapsed, I sat in my office with a glass of wine in hand, watching the financial news ticker scroll across my screen. One of the largest consulting firms in the country falls. Whitmore and Langston declares bankruptcy after scandals and mass client exodus. It was over. Robert Langston's empire was nothing more than dust. His name, once synonymous with power, was now a cautionary tale. I leaned back in my chair, letting the satisfaction wash over me like a warm tide. This was never about revenge for revenge's sake. This was about justice, about making sure that people like Robert, people who thought they could discard loyalty like trash, learned the hard way that actions have consequences. And Robert, his consequences had just begun. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I wanted to savor every last piece of his downfall. The moment the company officially shut its doors, I received an email from Olivia Hart, the secretary who had tipped me off in the first place. Subject, thought you'd like this. Attached was a screenshot of Robert's final moments in the company he once ruled. The boardroom, the same long mahogany table where I once sat being fired. Only this time, it was Robert who was getting kicked out. His face was red with rage, his hands clenched into fists, his lips parted mid-argument, but the decision had already been made. He was no longer CEO, no golden parachute, no severance package, no quiet exit. They threw him out like he was worthless. I smiled. Poetic, wasn't it? For weeks he tried to recover. He called old contacts, but no one wanted to be seen with him. He tried to start a new firm, but no bank would fund his venture. He applied for jobs, but no major consulting firm would touch him. And then the news broke that his house was on the market. A $4.3 million estate, one he had always flaunted, bragging about how only the elite could afford such luxury. Now, he was selling it off to cover his legal fees. The irony was delicious. One evening, I was sitting on the rooftop of my penthouse, staring at the city skyline, when my phone buzzed. A new email. Sender, Robert Langston. I stared at the name for a moment, then opened it. Subject, you win. There was no body text, no explanation, just those two words. I let out a slow exhale. The man who once smirked while firing me had finally admitted defeat. For a brief moment, I considered replying. Maybe something witty, maybe something final. But then I laughed softly, pressed delete, and set my phone down. Robert Langston was nothing more than a ghost from my past. I had already won. But fate wasn't done punishing him yet. A month later, I got an unexpected call from an old friend in the industry. "Selena, you won't believe this," they chuckled. "Oh, try me." Robert Langston just took a job at a third-rate consulting firm in Nevada. I nearly choked on my coffee. Nevada? Not even New York? Not even LA? Robert Langston, once a powerhouse CEO, was now nothing more than a low-level employee in a second-rate firm in the middle of nowhere. The man who had once controlled an empire was now working under someone else, answering to a boss, forced to take orders. And the best part? He couldn't do a damn thing about it. One day, fate gave me a gift. I was attending a high-profile industry gala, the kind Robert and I had once gone to together as business partners, rubbing elbows with CEOs, investors, and top executives. Only now, I was here as the head of my own empire. I was standing by the bar, engaged in conversation, when I felt a presence. I turned, and there he was, Robert Langston, but he wasn't the Robert I remembered. His expensive suits had been replaced by something modest, almost plain. There was no confidence in his posture, no arrogance in his smirk, just exhaustion, defeat. He caught my gaze and froze. For a split second, I saw something flash in his eyes. Was it regret, guilt, humiliation? I tilted my head, studying him. For the first time in his life, Robert Langston was beneath me. And he knew it, and he opened his mouth as if to speak, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said softly, smoothly. He hesitated. I just wanted to say," I smiled coldly, "whatever you have to say, I don't need to hear it." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Because what could he say? That he was sorry? That he regretted it? It didn't matter anymore. He had already paid the price. So I did the one thing he never expected. I walked away. Because I didn't need revenge anymore. I had already won. Months later, I was sitting in my new corner office, the one with a view that stretched across the entire city, the empire I built without anyone's permission. A knock came at my door. My assistant peeked in. "Selena, there's someone here to see you." I raised an eyebrow. "Who?" She hesitated. Robert Langston?" For a brief moment, I was tempted to see how far he had fallen, to hear whatever desperate plea he had prepared. But then I smiled. "No thanks," I said, turning back to my work. "Tell him I'm busy." Because I was. I wasn't looking back anymore. I was too busy ruling the empire I had built. And Robert Langston? He was nothing more than a footnote in my success story.